Okay, so you asked us to dive deep into an unsolved case from New York around 2001, specifically looking for someone named Jamie Freeman. Our mission today is really to take the source material you shared and just see what important, nuggets of knowledge we can pull out about unsolved cases from back then.
And, well, right away, looking through those sources for a Jamie Freeman homicide case, specifically New York 2001, we didn't find a direct match for exactly that.
Yeah, which actually the sources pointed out is kind of an insight itself.
Right.
They really highlighted how complicated this whole name game gets in cold case research. We saw how common names like Freeman or, variations like Jamie or James, they just pop up everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Mentions of a Jamie Freeman in Louisiana, that was aggravated battery in 2001. A James Freeman in Florida, different thing entirely. Recent charges.
Even older stuff, right. A Massachusetts murder case, James Freeman again.
Yeah, and there was an Oklahoma disappearance profiled in 2001, different Freeman. It shows that, like you said, distinguishing people is tough without very specific details. You get pointed in all sorts of directions.
Exactly. So while we didn't find that specific Jamie Freeman case you were looking for in these sources, we did find other really compelling unsolved cases from New York in 2001.
We did. The sources mentioned, for instance, the Jill and Udo case up in Syracuse. That was January 2001, right around the Super Bowl, tragically.
A very sad case. But the one that really stood out in the material, especially for New York City from that time, it showed how huge, unprecedented events can just sideswipe completely unrelated investigations.
Yeah, and that brings us squarely to the case of Henryk Siwiak.
Tell us about him. Who was Henryk Siwiak, according to the sources?
Okay, so Henryk Siwiak was 46. He was a Polish immigrant, married, had kids back in Krakow. He was actually a qualified inspector there.
And the sources really paint this picture of him coming here for that classic reason, right? To build a better future for his family.
Definitely. Working multiple jobs, construction, cleaning, just sending money home whenever he could.
The timing of his death?
Yeah.
It's just, wow. The sources say he was killed on September 11th, 2001.
Right. But, and this is crucial, his death had nothing to do with the terrorist attacks.
No.
His homicide is often cited as the only standard murder recorded by the NYPD for that entire day, sometimes called the last man killed on 9/11 in NYC, utterly separate from the WTC victims, tragically.
And 9/11 itself, that day, it shut down his construction job down in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah. So the sources say he spent the day looking for other work. And he found something, a cleaning job offer, but it was way out in Flatbush. For that night, $10 an hour.
And his wife, back in Poland, she warned him not to go out, right? His landlady, too.
They did, especially, dressed in camouflage gear on that specific night.
Yeah.
But the sources say he was determined. He felt he had to take the job, needed the money.
But he made a mistake, a really critical one, based on the sources.
A terrible mistake. He misread the subway map somehow. Ended up going north on Albany Avenue, deep into Bed-Stuy, a dangerous area, and miles from the Pathmark store he was aiming for.
So what happened there?
Well, around 11:5 that night, residents reported hearing an argument, then gunshots. 7 of them.
7 shots.
He was hit once in the lung. The sources describe him, staggering to a nearby house, ringing the doorbell, trying to get help.
Oh, man.
But nobody answered, likely terrified, given everything happening in the city that day. He collapsed right there, pronounced dead at the scene.
And this is where the impact of 9/11 on the investigation just becomes painfully clear in the source material.
Yeah, completely clear. NYPD resources, overwhelmed, totally focused on ground zero, understandably.
So his crime scene didn't get the usual treatment?
Not at all. They got a basic evidence collection unit, the kind usually sent for burglaries, not homicides, not the specialized crime scene unit.
And the detectives.
Instead of the usual 9 or so for a homicide, sources say maybe 3, tops. This lack of initial resources, it just crippled the case right from the start.
Wow. What did they find at the scene, though?
They found 7.40 caliber shell casings. But here's the thing that complicates the motive, according to the sources. He still had $75 cash in his wallet.
Okay, so that makes a simple robbery less straightforward.
Exactly. It raises questions. A botched robbery is still possible. Maybe things escalated because of language barriers. His English was limited. But the cash being there, it doesn't quite fit neatly.
Right. Were there other theories explored in the sources?
Yeah, there's also this possibility of mistaken identity, or maybe even a hate crime.
Because of how he was dressed and the timing.
Precisely. His sister, she's quoted strongly in the sources, believes that given the fear after 9/11, His camo clothes, dark hair, his accent. Maybe someone tragically misidentified him or targeted him out of prejudice.
And the sources did note that there was a documented spike in hate crimes around then.
There was. Although, it's important to note, the sources also say the NYPD hasn't officially classified it as a hate crime. Lack of direct evidence, no witnesses saying that, and a detective mentioned the specific location wasn't really near any likely targets. So it's still a complex question based on the material.
He basically became, as some sources put it, an invisible victim.
Yeah, hopelessly anonymous was one phrase used, just completely overshadowed by the enormity of 9/11. It's still a cold case. There's a reward, $12,000, but nothing. No breakthroughs.
And the human cost, the sources detail that too. His wife having to change her whole career path to support their kids, feeling like the case is just forever unsolved.
Yeah. For his family, September 11th isn't just this date in history. It's the anniversary of his murder. Unsolved.
So bringing it back to your original interest in New York cases from 2001, the story of Henryk Syriac, pieced together from these sources, it really hits home how complex these old cases can be.
It shows how huge events can just tragically derail individual justice. And it really underscores why it's so important to keep telling these stories, bringing them back into the light even years later.
Absolutely. Keeping that memory alive, trying to generate awareness, maybe helping that quest for justice. That's what we aim for in these deep dives.
And for this specific case, if you or anyone listening happens to have any information about the murder of Henryk Syriac on September 11th, 2001, the sources say you should contact NYPD Crime Stoppers. The number is 1-800-577-TPS.
1-800-577-TPS.
Yes, it can be anonymous.
Yes, completely anonymous. You can also submit tips online. That's at crimestoppers.niptonline.org.
Okay, crimestoppers.niptonline.org.
So as you think about this, maybe consider this question. How do these massive global events and the collective fear they create end up shaping individual lives? And what does it really mean when one person's tragedy gets lost inside a huge historical catastrophe?